Okay, so today I'll try another mobile stream, and this is using Ethernet. So this just seemed to work a little better. It still did crash, I think, yesterday briefly, but generally it seems to be more stable. And of course, there's not really much more you can do than this. There is just something inherently about it, whether it be the phone itself, which I don't see really why, because this is a pretty new phone, iPhone 16 Max Pro, or it could be something about the Streamlabs or some other thing that just has some negative functionality to it. Right? There's something about it that just isn't smooth. There's delays, there's crashes, there's so many issues that I don't understand. Like I can understand it if I'm using the mobile data itself, which I was trying to do. So like today I'm going to try to do something like what I was doing while driving, which is kind of doing my debate format and topics like that because I thought that would be cool. Like, oh, if I'm driving, I can just do this either as a stream or I guess I could just record it. But it seemed kind of convenient because, okay, you're driving anyway, you're not really doing anything, and I can just discuss different topics and things like that. But it kept crashing so incessantly that it was so distracting that I couldn't actually do it. So we could maybe use this as like a visual aid, but I also, it's kind of hard to go into this like with a context. Like I need a little structure to it because there's so many things I could do. So I could discuss it like on a specific, like a certain like real world topic. We could look at like news, current stuff, which I tend to not really like doing that. Part of the whole concept behind the debate format was like objectivity. That's my whole calling card or what I was known for. So it's about being objective. So you're not really looking at the specifics. You're looking at like the big picture of something or the kind of the deeper process behind it instead of getting distracted by the detailed, superficial, specific thing. So let's see here. So a lot of it is objectivity. So you're looking at something without preconceived notions, just inherently see it for what it is. So oftentimes it's like misframed as a claim, right? This would be the fallacy I would run into a lot. You could be objectively observing something, but because people are so indoctrinated or dug into their own mindset, their worldview, it seems like simply being neutral and objective and just seeing something for what it is, it seems like a claim. Like, oh, it seems like you're saying that. Or it seems like, oh, that's you being this way, or like, like shoot the messenger. But in reality, they're projecting their own worldview and saying, no, if you don't have this, then you must be. It's almost like a Bolshevik rhetoric, or I call false duality, is one of my logical razors. So, okay, where's the one that you can like write with your finger? I guess. Oh, I guess I can use the art one maybe for that free form. I almost want to. Can I go in like the? Okay, you can. You go in the landscape thing, which I should be streaming sort of in landscape too. So here, I find this more enjoyable to do than typing it out on here for whatever reason. So let's go. Okay, I can't. This could be fun actually. This is kind of how I was using like the Kindle Scribe. So okay, here we go. Where's my shit here? Okay, come on, come on. Just doesn't matter. So false duality. Again, my handwriting. Maybe I shouldn't do it like this because my handwriting not going to be the. There should be one that like auto corrects your thing. Like you can still write, but then it doesn't. Let me try to do it like a little better. Like do it really robotically almost. Yeah, I should do it like that. Although the D doesn't work too well, and in fact the A's aren't even consistent now. Trying to write it in like very fuck. It might be better just to deal with the other thing, but um. So again, false duality means several different fallacies encompassed here. Like, if you're not with me or against me, if you don't agree with that, with a certain worldview, it must mean you're diametrically opposed to it. So you can't just be neutral or objective or have a different opinion or just something in between, gray area, overlap, nuance, none of that. It's like either you agree specifically completely with something, right, or you're completely against it, right? And this is how a lot of framing is done, right? So you're either 100% dug in agreement, or you're 100% against it, you're anti, you're this, that. There can't be any nuance in between, which is, sometimes people will use that as a discrediting factor, like, oh, you're just a centrist, or oh, you're just this or that, which is, or like even the term atheist is a fallacy that way. So you're being defined by what you don't do rather than what you do, which is a sign of an outward, insistent, contrivance state. Like they're so dug in, right? Whoever it might be, or society, even overall, or a religion, or whatever. They're so dug in that again, they're seeing everything from their own insular worldview. So simply someone being neutral and objective and having just again a different opinion, not one that's contrary or again diametrically opposed. It could just be something different that isn't the exact same thing. Or again, that you might have certain things in common, have certain disagreements, but this is where the nuance goes away. So that's what people also look for in either discussion and debate and even like content like doing this, they were looking for like hot takes or clear, like a clear false duality, like, oh, you're 100% right about this, the other person 100% wrong, look how you dunked on him. That's not really a productive way to look at it, because it's not that simple, right? There's always going to be nuance, there's always going to be in between. It's not, because think about it, if it was that simple, then everybody would just have the same view. Oh, there's just one absolute right answer and everybody believes that, and everything else is wrong and just unquestionable. So it's obviously not that simple. And in fact, here's another term. Well, I guess maybe I should write out what they are. How do you uh how do you move it? What? I'm hitting the ruler. Why wouldn't it? Um, I don't know how you. Oh, you have to like hit done there. Um, I like the idea of doing it by writing, but it's kind of different. It's not really gonna work, I think. It's too much. If I especially I don't have to write too much, but um yeah, like how it always says I'm in Cupertino here. Okay, where's the notes pages here? So again, false duality is going to be again similar to Bolshevik rhetoric, similar to again just in general, where again you have to be on one extreme side or the other. So I'll give you a good example, like Trump, right? Let's say you voted for Trump in 2024 or even any other year, right? So because you did that, right? You voted for Trump rather than Biden, or Trump rather than Harris, or vice versa. That must mean, oh, you're a diehard MAGA, you're Republican, you agree with everything they say, you don't have any, there can't be any in between, right? It's just like you're fully dug in, you're associated with that, you're labeled with that, that's it. You agree with everything they say, even if that's not true, right? If you look at someone like me who would, I could disagree with everything they say, but then you could still say, oh, well, it's the lesser of two evils or some, which is still a bad mentality to have. Don't get me wrong. I'd still favor, in the mindset of independence, but I'm just saying the ability to do something, right? This is cognitive dissonance. The ability to do something, but then still have some reservation about it, instead of again, being unable to face cognitive dissonance and say, no, if you do something, it must be 100% right. You can't question it at all. It's perfect, it's unquestionable, absolute. That's not a very productive perspective to have, but people often do, because they think, well, how could I have done it if it's not, how could I have done it if it's not perfect? But like, you know, you have to have that self-awareness. Like, okay, you do it for such and such reason. It might be the best alternative. It might be something you have to settle for, but it doesn't mean that it's 100% perfect, unquestionable, absolute. So again, you can find some nuance in between. That's the whole irony of it. Like people who voted for Trump can dislike Trump and disagree with a lot of what he says, and people who voted for Biden or Harris could disagree with a lot of what they say and they don't like. So you don't like either one, but you're still doing it, which isn't a good model to follow. But oh, they're this is a good example too of false duality. Like, oh, why did people vote for Biden in 2020? Oh, it's just because they didn't like Trump. So it's like they're voting against them. They're voting against Trump, even though there's no such thing as voting against them. It's a fallacy built into it because that doesn't explain why you'd specifically vote for Biden. Then, if you're voting against Trump, then by that logic, you could have voted for anybody, right? Literally, you could vote for Kanye West, and it would be against Trump, right? So literally, it doesn't make sense. You could do it for anybody then. But also, again, same thing. Oh, then people in 2024 could recommit the same fallacy and say, oh, we're voting against Democrats or we're voting against Harris and all this. So like again, it's the capacity for nuance that you can have where not everything has to be one of two clear sides, and usually it's not. I mean, um, I guess that there's a certain perception that a mass of people are like that. The majority of people will be dug in. So it's sort of a trick of the ego, right? People get dug in onto a side that really doesn't matter and doesn't have to do with them, but they get dug in like, okay, they'll do something, they'll be part of a group, or again, they'll vote a certain way, and now they do dig into it and associate with it because they feel like, well, I couldn't possibly be wrong, and I don't want to kind of have doubt in that. But then it creates an unproductive state because now it's like you personalize it when it should just be like what I call almost a useful idiot thing, right? Like you can say, okay, I voted for this person instead of this person because I think they're a useful idiot. They're going to be more useful to me than the other person. But you don't have to be like emotionally attached to it or dug in. It's like, okay, I don't care about either one. They're both clowns, right? But it's a means to an end. I'm trying to do it for a certain goal, right? So you're looking at it more objectively. You're not really emotionally attached or anything. It's just a simple process. So let me try to define these as I go. The fallacy of two of only two sides of any not even issue as much, but like any topic. If you are on a side, you agree with absolutely everything, and if not, you are against absolutely everything. So again, the way to say that is like a common fallacy with this is like anarchy. If you say, oh, let's just say it in a general sense, right? You criticize something about the government or a system of government, then people might come back and say, oh, so you're in favor of anarchy? You must not want government. What would you do without the police or this or that? But you're not arguing against the core idea and the basic principle of a government in general, right? You could be saying, okay, this specific one and this specific system and this specific issue, right, is what we have. So it's like the idea that, oh, you can't criticize something unless or if you criticize something, you're against the very concept of it. So, but okay, I criticize, let's say, the education system. It's bad in this, and this way. Then somebody could come back and say, well, what? So you're against education? That means you don't want children to learn, do you? You want children to just be ignorant, but it's like you're not arguing against the very concept of education. You're arguing against the specific application or the flawed process that you're pointing out. Like, okay, there are certain problems with public schooling and funding and this and that, and wasted resources and bad curriculum. So that's the nuance that is often missed, right? You can't be critical of a specific thing or system or aspect. It must be, oh, if you criticize it, you're against the whole very concept of it, and the only otherwise you have to accept everything about it blindly. So if you participate in it, you're vouching for it 100% and it's perfect, and you agree with everything unquestionably, which is not true, but that's like the perception that would exist, right? If you do it, you must agree with it. Otherwise, oh, you're a hypocrite. Which again, this is exactly the fallacy we're talking about. Like you can't do it, but then still, okay, I disagree with this. I have some reservation. That's nuance, not necessarily hypocrisy, because by that logic, then nobody could ever change or nobody could ever improve. right? If you recognize some flaw with yourself or with the process that you do, and you say, okay, this is flawed, and I'm going to try to improve or change it. But then, oh, but then you're a hypocrite because you've been doing that process or you do it right now. So anytime you try to correct something, you would just have to pretend everything's perfect, and no flaws exist with yourself or with the process. Otherwise, anytime you recognize a flaw and try to change it, oh, that makes you a hypocrite, but that you're trying to improve it. You're trying to say, okay, I'm going to be self-aware and say, this is a flaw. I'm going to try to change it. I'm going to try to improve it. So you can admit that you were wrong, but oh no, now that kills your credibility. Like, would you rather blindly pretend everything's perfect or would you rather fix something? So again, there's a lot of different interpretations there. So let's get back to the idea of atheism as a label, or again, the what was the other thing I was saying? Like neutrality, you're defined by what you don't do rather than what you do. So that's why atheism is not a word that even makes any sense. Because again, when you're born, you're an atheist, right? Like everyone is born an atheist. Because again, not that you're taking some outward action like, oh, look, I don't believe in something. Is that you're too young to even think for yourself. You know, you're 1 year old. What capacity? You don't even have the ability to consider that. So you're too young to even think for yourself or do anything. Yet, oh, we're gonna label them. Oh, look at this 1 year old. He's an atheist. Like, it's not a real thing. So everyone is born that way. Then later on in your life, when you're old enough to think for yourself, whatever exact age you think that is, now you can decide for yourself. Okay, do you want to believe this or believe something or not? So you can't really use that as a label because again, you're defining somebody by what they don't do rather than what they do, which is a complete fallacy because you can say that with anything. Okay, you're a non. I don't even. It's just stupid. Like, oh, you're a non-horse rider because you drive a car. You're a non-walker because you're driving a car. You're a non-flyer because like. You wouldn't say all the things you don't do. You would say what you are doing. You're driving, so you're a driver, or you're doing some. It's just sometimes it's annoying to even feel like you have to explain this, but people are so stupid sometimes that you do. So, or whatever, whatever. Um, so again, you can't define somebody by what they don't do, but it shows you like a certain bias in the structure. So like, it's the whole religion is a good example where you don't have to disprove something, right? Because you're not making a claim. You're not saying anything. Right? This is the unwillingness to be puzzled, which is not really my term, but it's an absurdist concept. Like, so people would rather believe in a false absolute than simply be ignorant, right? So they'd rather believe in something made up just to give a sense of certainty rather than just simply acknowledge that they don't know or they can't know. So again, just like the atheist is a non-label that shouldn't even exist because you're not doing anything. It's you're not. It just what does it really mean? Like, oh, you're born that way and then nothing changes, so you're not doing anything outwardly. It's just a consistent state. So, um, so what you have is like if you how can I explain it? Like you um, just yeah, like the proof of that. Okay, you would have to prove that God doesn't exist, but not that they have to prove that it does exist. Again, you're just in a neutral state. You're not making a claim, so it's the unwillingness to be puzzled. Like, oh, how can you just say then that oh you don't have all the answers and you don't know everything, right? And that we can't explain exactly everything about how the universe came to be and life and this and that. And so first of all, you see the human ego there, like assuming that we should know all of that, even with the immense technology and progress that we've made. Think about it in earlier times of history too, that same argument. Like thousands of years ago, before we even had the technology that we currently have, which is still not going to be enough to answer every question, but it would have been, oh, so what are you saying? That you can't explain it, so therefore you don't have credibility, but assuming that we should be able to explain it thousands of years ago, exactly the origins of the universe and everything. That's a bit of an egotistical assumption that we should be able to do that. Even now, we can't do that. So, so because people aren't willing to acknowledge that, So that's why you don't have to be making a claim, right? You're not saying anything, but the burden of proof is on the claim maker. So those who believe would have to then justify and qualify, right? So again, there's the false duality that you don't have to disprove something. They have to prove it because they're the ones making the claim. They're the ones outwardly believing in a specific faith, right? So they would have to constantly justify that and consider that. So that is kind of the right style that I want to do though. See, we introduce one concept, right, one of my terms, and then we talk about it in great length. It's not like I want to do a ton rapid fire. You can do like a whole subject on it, topic on it. I'm intrigued by the idea of doing this for like long periods of time, and then maybe people will start to come in and it'll make more of a community out of it. But again, that's the core concept. So again, the framing of neutrality as an outward position to this is like the pro non anti dynamic. My most viewed video actually on my Court of Reason channel because whatever, I don't know why, but most of those don't have very many views, and I haven't posted enough of them. But basically, it's just all clips from a review of when I went through and tried to review a lot of my old terms and logical razors from my format. So pro non anti is basically just again the false framing of neutrality. So like again, let's say a contrivance state is guess I can write this out. We'll just define it kind of briefly, right? If a contrivance state is pro, obviously just pro, anti, in favor, of, or against, not that that needs to be explained, but is pro blank, it will treat pro as non and non as anti. It's a very, very simple concept, but it's the best way to explain it. So let's say you live in a society that's very pro-religion. Just as an example, I don't want to feel like I'm picking on religion, but whatever. You live in a society that is pro-religion, so then it will treat being not, it'll treat simply not being religious as anti, like, oh, you must be against it. So it basically pushes everything over one level. So you'll say, again, neutrality is in the middle, right? I had this, this maybe could justify a drawing. Let me, here. This is the little Venn diagram chart that I had done. So we have, um, okay, here we go. So you have, actually that doesn't, okay, that doesn't work. It's not what I wanted. Let me see. Okay, so you'd have pro, anti, oh, fuck, it's like, are you fucking serious? Alright, whatever. That part of the screen is, oh, it's cucked by the dynamic island. Right, and then non is in the middle. I mean, ignore the ugly drawing, but the point is, again, so let's say society is pro something, right? Now pro becomes the new non because it's like it goes without saying. It's taken for granted. So like, oh, you live in a society that's very religious, so now it's not treated as an outward practice. It's like, oh no, that's just normal. That goes without saying. So pro moves over to the middle to become non, and then non moves over to become anti. So you say being religious is no longer an outward practice. It's just normal. It just goes without saying. It's just the default, right? It's like it's neutral, even though it's not, right? False inherent. And then non becomes anti, which means simply being neutral and simply not outwardly doing that thing is seen as like you're against it. It's like a negative interpretation. You're a heretic or you're somehow a contrarian or this or that. Even though you're not doing anything, you're just neutral. Right, again, being actively outwardly in favor of that process is treated as neutral, and then being neutral becomes negative, right? Like you're against it. So is a good way to show the use of that actually. The the picture drawing. Right, so once more, pronoun antidynamic is going to be if a contrivance state is in favor of something, pro something, it will treat pro as non. So again, it'll treat this outward practice as neutral and default, as if it goes without saying, inherent. And then it'll treat neutrality as against it, anti, negative, again, diametrically opposed. So, okay, what else do we have here? This could be good. I want to do this again, but I keep saying that, but then I never. This is it. I mean, this is the way to do it. There's nothing else, you know. It doesn't require anything. Like, you just do it. You know what I mean? It's just very, very. One thing that I don't understand about these mobile streams is the timestamp on the VODs. Like, literally, I could do a 20-minute stream and then my VOD will be 50 minutes long. Like, I have no idea why that happens. Maybe when it crashes, but I feel like it didn't even crash. Like, this one seems to be, yeah, like there's a 54-minute VOD from yesterday, but I definitely wasn't on for 54 minutes, so I don't know. Um, yeah, this could be good. I just don't know exactly how to approach it. Again, Falls Due Out. Is that even on my channel? I can't remember if let me actually look at the ones I guess I could look up on here too. I was gonna look on my other phone, but let me look at my Court of Reason channel, right? YouTube. I can't remember if I guess I
To
could
solve this
react to
puzzle.
video. Fuck. I guess I could react to videos, but I don't know. The only reason why I wouldn't want to do that is because of copyright considerations, but that should work. Or like, yeah, we should be in the age where YouTube would tell you that. Like every video will have like first of all, one feature that YouTube should definitely have is like spoiler tags where, you know, if it's like a thumbnail that shows like, oh, this character dies in this game or something, you know, there should be automatic spoiler tags and things like that, that those kind of videos shouldn't appear in suggested. Right. I've always said that. But the second thing is that it should be like, oh yeah, like whether something is copyright or whether, again, like content creator friendly. There should be a little tag or icon for that. Like this video can be done, it can be reacted to without you getting in trouble versus it can be. Right. Like it seems stupid, but that's the kind of thing that, or I like this as a concept too, like reacting to your own content, which might sound dumb, but because there's so much of it, like I have years worth of stuff, right? My old VODs and everything. So some of it could be worth doing because you know what I mean? Like it's some old discussion, so I shouldn't have to rehash it. I can just do it. 4 subscribers, 47 videos. I just don't post enough, really. But imagine blaming. Okay, here are some of my logical razors. Imagine blaming celestial objects for personal problems. Now, this is some of my thing that I would do in the course of debate, right? I was always known for these sort of sharp and pointed logical razors. Absolutist takedown of astrology of 2013 debate. So again, this is how I basically just would describe astrology. Imagine blaming celestial objects for personal problems. That's basically what astrology is. Then this one I use also in my one of my like GTA RP things and maybe some other storytelling type context. So it's like talking to myself. It's called thinking. You should try it sometime. Oh yeah, it's one of my short stories, but I've used it in other. It's in my GTA RP video. Um, if you trace anything back far enough, you end up with the ultimate uncertainty of its origin, including the universe, everything itself. You can never answer a process relatively with science. Wait, you can answer a process reactively with science, but never its ultimate inception point. Fallacy of false certainty and technical jargon. So it's like, well, let's use the Bill O'Reilly thing for this, right? Tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that, which is technically true. He's technically right, actually. Bill O'Reilly did nothing wrong in that meme, at least it's made fun of. you can't explain you can't explain that. Okay, you explain it because of the moon and the moon creates the tides, and you can explain, you know, a natural process. But if you trace it back far enough, okay, then why does the moon work that way, and why does the moon exist, and where did the moon come from, right? So if you trace it back far enough, you really can't explain it. Now that doesn't justify the particular dogma that he's talking about, like, oh, that means there's God, but it means that technically you couldn't explain that, right? You can say, oh, why does it rain? And then you'll say mockingly, oh, well, of course, it's because of evaporation, precipitation, condensation, whatever, right? You'll explain it on a technical level, but it doesn't matter because then why do those things happen, and why does the process that makes those things happen? And again, you trace it back far enough, you're not really explaining anything. Contrivance is this is one of my favorite quotes actually. Contrivance is only real by acknowledgement and only necessary by overextension. And this is like a core tenet of my absolutist philosophy, which is okay. Let's analyze this one actually. Contrivance is only real by acknowledgement and only necessary by overextension. So it might sound like a mouthful, but think about it. What is something in society that would be contrived that is only real by acknowledgement? So if everyone collectively stopped acknowledging it, it would no longer exist. So, for example, political power, or just like power in general, it's not like somebody's physically powerful, right? Like you say, oh, they're like some macho super Hulk or something, so they have physical strength or real resources like weapons and stuff. If everybody tomorrow just stopped acknowledging a president or minister or whatever, right? So let's say that society collectively just doesn't acknowledge that authority anymore, the government, it would cease to be powerful. Now you could say, well, it has military and it has weapons and this and that, but all of that relies on, right? Because like the weapon itself has the power, right? Not so much the person, right? It's just a random person. They're just a normal, there's nothing really special about them. So you have to acknowledge it, and their whole power and stature relies 100% on the collective acknowledgement of it. If everyone just ceases to acknowledge, so that again, the point being that it's not true power, it's not real, right? Just because you collectively acknowledge something doesn't mean that it makes it real. So again, all it would take tomorrow for every political leader in the world to cease to have any power, every government in the world, all it would take is the collective lack of acknowledgement. The public of every country, any country could just say, we no longer acknowledge your power, and that's it. That's all it would take. So clearly that shows you it's not real. You can have its uses, but that's a separate point. Like, again, it's only real by acknowledgement, therefore it's not actually real. And then only necessary by overextension. This could be applied to things like, oh, running water or certain technological conveniences, electricity, or a lot of artificial things in society. So it's like, you might think those things are necessary, but it's like, oh, if the world was a village of 100, as I reference here, if the world was a village of 100, then, oh, the world is your oyster and there's plenty of resources for everybody and so on and so on. So you might say, oh, whatever would you do without the modern conveniences of technology and this and that? But the only reason why those things are necessary is because there's so many people in the first place, right? Like there's 8 billion people. So, oh, you need these things. Otherwise, there'd be mass chaos and not enough for everybody. But again, if the world was a village of 100, which doesn't have to be literal, but like much less populated, then what happens is, oh, there's plenty of resources for everyone, even if there's certain challenges that go along with that, sure. But you know what I mean? That again, the point is there's a lot of things that we take for granted as necessary, but they're only necessary. Again, overextension is what this means. Like it's only necessary because there's so many people, or because how else would I describe that? It's only necessary because there's so many people, or because you take an inherent process and you kind of, I can't remember exactly how I described that, but even just that, like again, there's so many people, that's why something that isn't necessary inherently seems to be necessary, and a lot of things you take for granted are there. Everything mass produced suffers inequality for it, even life itself. That's also similar point to those of 100 concepts. Okay, let's go back. I'm not going to watch these necessarily, although I guess I could. Or, that's almost the whole thing you could do on your channel is like, you could just replay forget about even reacting. You just replay your old videos and stuff, and you might think that's kind of dumb or redundant, or like even big channels could do it, but it's actually pretty legitimate because like again, not everybody has seen everything you've ever done. So it takes me back to a quote of mine, like to do with movies and stuff. Oh, like if you've never seen a movie, even if it's 100 years old, it's like you'll say, oh, you're watching a new movie. Well, it could be new even if it's 50, 100 years old because if you haven't seen it, it's new to you. So what does it matter, right? Anything that you haven't experienced is still new. So it's the same idea that like, oh, look at him replaying an old video on his channel. Like let's say some big streamer goes back and Mr. Beast shows you him playing Minecraft or some shit, right? Some of his earlier videos. It still could be interesting or new and fresh to you because you've never seen it, right? You haven't seen every single thing everyone's done, so whatever. Okay, introduction. What is contrivance? Contrivance response to inherent man, pronoun antidynamic. I just showed you there. I guess I'll just define them really quickly for you here. So contrivance, we've already said what that is. Right, contrivance response and inherent man. So inherent man is the state of man of human beings. If they're again, if you're born in the jungle, not indoctrinated by society, your inherent natural state without any external influence, how people would naturally be. And so contrivance response is the response of society, etc., to that. So we say, again, it's like laws or morality. Those are contrivance responses to inherent man. Like people would inherently do something that we don't want them to do. Like let's say we can see throughout history, or we can see even presently, like there's certain things people would do naturally. Like they might hurt each other, they might kill each other, they might do whatever, uninhibited. So it's not so much that, oh, morality is absolute or inherent. It's more that we pretend it is, or we create those things like laws and morals in response to the inherent man to try to shape it to say, okay, these are the things people would inherently do. So now we're going to respond to it with that to try to prevent it. Right. So again, it's not an argument of whether you should do that or not. It's just like a reality check that means those things are not real. Those things are not absolute. We just pretend they are, or we just pose them in response to the inherent state. Pronoun antidynamic. Okay, we just showed that. We did two videos on this, but yeah, this is what I was saying. 217 views. I don't know why, but these are meant to be like very short and to the point. Society and laws are a reaction to inherent man. So that again, same concept that those things are constructs made to react to the inherent state of people that we're acknowledging. People would do these things. That's why we create laws to try to prevent people from doing these things. And even then, some people will still do them. But the non-accountable false absolute, that's kind of, I forget exactly how I described that, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, here we go. Like, if a horrible, okay, say you're religious, and a horrible tragedy happens, like a tsunami or a flood or something, and it kills a bunch of people and it causes all kind of damage. Then you get out of that situation and you survive it, and you say, "Oh, thank God for saving me from that horrible tragedy," right? But you don't blame God for putting you in that situation. So like when something good happens, you thank God, but when something bad happens, you don't blame God. So you say, "Oh, well, either God's not all powerful then, or God doesn't have your best interest in mind, or God just doesn't care, or is like nature objective." So there's a major contradiction there because again, you'll say, "Oh, thank God for getting me out of that situation." But then if God is all powerful, then what about? And if not, then it kind of invalidates the whole idea of being worshipped or regarded highly anyway. But again, you thank God for getting you out of a bad situation, but you don't blame them for putting you in that situation in the first place. So how does that make sense? Belief systems bypassing accountability. Um, I'm trying to remember what I said without actually watching it. You would bypass accountability by, I guess you could just say like, oh, anybody who questions it is a heretic or certain labels like that. Mm. Right, or again, just you'll say, oh, you can't think about it as if Like, oh, it goes without saying, it's just an absolute, but it should be the opposite. Like, you can think about it as much as you want, a question of as much as you want, and it wouldn't discredit it. So, right, it's something's taken for granted and not questioned, not because, oh, it goes without saying, but because any amount of questioning would invalidate it. So it requires you to have that buffer of not questioning it. Morality as a non-inherent. Again, sort of the same concept that if it was absolute, then it wouldn't even need to be talked about or discussed or upheld by subjective human laws and enforcement. And if, again, if it was inherent, you wouldn't even need to discuss or acknowledge it. So it's clearly a human construct, which is, again, you can argue on a functional level, okay, it's useful, it's necessary, it's positive. We can the debate how to best uphold it and indoctrinate it, enforce it through laws, but it's not absolute, it's not inherent. And again, even despite all those constructs that we make, people still do immoral things, etc. So it's clearly not absolute. Appeal to ego. I didn't know this one had so many views. Actually, 16. Wow. Um, this is the idea of, again, like enforcement, where the way to stop people from doing something bad isn't to appeal to their better nature and say, oh, well, it's the right thing to do, or it's, moral, or, some other gratification. The way to truly do it is through the threat of enforcement, through appealing to their ego and appealing to their self-interest. So, like, why would a person commit a crime? Oh, they would do it for their own self-interest. So, how do you stop someone from committing a crime? By the same basis. You don't say, oh, this is wrong and you're a good person and all that. That's not actually how it works. It would be enforcement. So you'd say, you would commit a crime for your own self-interest. So you're not going to commit a crime for your own self-interest, because if you do, then you're going to go to jail and we're going to punish you. So what's actually operating is the same measure, right? It's the same process at work. You're saying you're saying that, again, somebody would do something bad for their own self-interest. So the only way to stop them from doing it is also in their self-interest, saying, okay, we're going to threaten you, punish you, right? Use enforcement. So again, rather than, you could argue gratification, or you could argue, again, oh, you're just a good person, or this or that, or we're going to appeal to, there was a certain phrasing I had for it that I can't remember, like, instead of that, we're going to appeal to, again, just the goodness of morality, or something like that. No, we're going to appeal to the same thing. You would commit a crime for your self-interest, so you're going to not commit a crime for your self-interest too. So we have to appeal to the same thing. Again, by threatening you, we're going to lock you up, we're going to punish you. So indoctrination and enforcement, sort of indoctrination being the layer above it, where enforcement is ultimately the basis, but you would have indoctrination to try and make it seem like you don't need it, right? So you say, we're going to enforce it after you commit a crime to try to punish you and discourage it. But we're going to try to indoctrinate people in the youth, especially, to uh, try to make them not do it in the first place. Some of these I can't remember exactly what I said, so I'm trying not to watch them. But um, okay, social contrivance. This one I'm trying to remember. Indoctrination and enforcement. So what specifically would I say? I mean, these are all very short and to the point. That's what I would try to do too, is like do these very short and sharp logical razors where they're just very, very, take somewhat of a complicated concept and make it very simple. So again, you have the two layers where you indoctrinate people when they're young to try to prevent them from doing certain things. But then if that fails, you fall back on enforcement. So you would like, indoctrination could take on the form here of like stigmatization. So you'd say society will stigmatize certain things, like the collective mass of people. So like public shaming and stuff like that. Oh, so we do that so that we discourage it on the social level. And then if that fails, then okay, we have enforcement as the fallback. Social contrivance is really short and sweet, 9 seconds. It's just, again, how the self-interest is overextended to a collective. The idea that, again, you could argue everything, okay, everything is just a non-base of self-interest. So it's a way that you take the self-interest and make it seem like it's something else. So again, the self has to appeal to the collective by saying, "Oh no, I'm not just doing this for my self-interest. I'm doing it for the greater good." But then it overlaps with your self-interest. That's the defining factor, or vice versa. The collective will say, collective society will, oh, this is for your safety, this is for your benefit. That's why you give in to this collective. So it's a two-way street of one subverting the other, using it as a pretense. So again, it's the way that self-interest is overextended to a collective. How you can achieve yours through the vehicle of that. And again, the reason why people go along with it's sort of like a trick, right? You're saying the individual who's part of a collective would be thinking, oh, I'm going to use the collective to my advantage to get something from it. But then the collective which is made up of those same individual selves, is going to think the same thing. Oh, I'm going to pretend like I value the collective to achieve my own self-interest. And then I'm going to pretend like I value the individual to achieve something right for the collective. So again, this one is always a mouthful, but dependent overextended pretense. And then the whole phrasing was that necessary invalid, which means like the fact that it's necessary shows you the basis is invalid, which means um, again, like the basis of self-interest to say what I was just talking about, like with the collective, you say, "Oh, I'm doing this for the greater good," or let's pretend it's like your job, right? So let's say you're a doctor and you're like, "Oh, I help people. That's why I'm a doctor because I care about people and I help them." But then if you weren't getting a paycheck for it, now you might think twice. Or if it was a lower paycheck, doctors make pretty good money, so now you might not do it. So again, the difference is the defining factor is that, oh, you're getting money for it, self-interest. That's what you really care about. Then on the secondary level, you say, oh, but I'm helping people, and oh, and if you truly cared about it, you wouldn't. Maybe you wouldn't do it for money, or maybe you do something else. But that's the point, is right. The defining factor is usually means, like money, zero sum means, or stimuli acme, something like that. You have some incentive that's actually the defining factor, and then you just use a pretense to say, "Oh no, I'm not doing it just for that. I'm doing it for this other reason." But if you take away, right, the dependent overextended pretense, then the other reasons go out the window. So let's use it in a relationship sense, right? Stimuli acme will say you're in a relationship with somebody and you say, "Oh, but I like their personality and I like they're funny and their jokes and this and that." But if you take away the prospect of sex or sexual related things, at least, would you still care about those things as much? Would you still value that, right? So you'll say, again, I love their personality, but do you really love their personality? Or again, all those things are secondary to this. Take away the prospect of sex, and now all of a sudden, right, you might not care about those other things at all. Man, how many did I actually upload? Holy shit. Or some of these I started to just combine them. Like I made a Twitter. I was actually going to do something like that on here, where like I was going to mess with social media stuff, but oh man, this is more than I thought. Um, okay, self versus collective is kind of the same thing I explained, but again, it creates like the half-mass state. Most of these like segue into the next one in a manner. Like again, the self will undermine its own interest to appease the collective. The collective will undermine itself to appease the self. So, and again, the collective consists of individual selves, so it's the ultimate trick because you'll pretend, okay, I'm not just about my own self-interest, and it'll be glorified, right? Like, oh, well, valuing, so, like, what is above self-interest? Oh, valuing society and a collective. Oh, why do we glorify that? Oh, because it consists of individual selves who also value only self-interest. So it's the same measure process that we were just talking about, like with enforcement. You have to appeal to the ego. So it's the same thing here. There's no higher standard. There's self-interest, and then there's collective self-interest, which means the reason why we glorify that. Why? Let's glorify the collective mass of people. Like we're doing something good for society. We're doing something good for other people. Why is that glorified? Why is that above the self-interest? Oh, because it's still self-interest. It's just the self-interest of other people. So that's why they would glorify it, right? Like, let's say okay, you're selfish and you only care about yourself. And then other people will say, oh, you should care about other people. Why do they say that? Because they're among that group. They want, so again, it's the same thing. They want their self-interest to be achieved, so they use the pretense of, oh, it's good to help other people. But by the same logic, then, okay, they should be helping you.